Welcome to Board Certified, expert interview episodes about medical licensing exams and healthcare careers. I'm Cassandra, marketing specialist with Achievable, and we offer affordable, adaptive online prep courses for the USMLE Step 1, MCAT, PTCE, MPTE, CSCS, and others. Each course contains everything you need to succeed, including comprehensive study guides, video lessons, thousands of practice questions powered by our memory enhancing algorithm, and full-length practice exams. You can try any course for free at achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to save 10%. Now, let's get started. Today we have Mark Christiani with us, and Mark, I'd love if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mark Christiani. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me on. I am a strength and conditioning specialist, or CSCS. I also possess an RSCC, which is a registered strength and conditioning coach certification through the National Strength and Conditioning Association, or the NSCA for short. I've been a strength and conditioning coach in the college sector for 3 to 4 years, and then transitioned into the tactical sector where I'm now a strength and conditioning coach with O2X Human Performance, working with the US Army running their holistic health and fitness program.
Awesome. Great. And so, yeah, today we are going to be talking about, just generally what it takes to prepare for the CSCS. And to start off, I'm just curious, in your experience, or maybe people that, you have worked with, what is the difference between kind of what you expected with the CSCS and what was actually the reality of that study process and prep process?
So the study process can be a little overwhelming at first. I think most people hear, like, oh, just study the book. The book is dense. It is a thick book with a lot of information. And it kind of does a grand overview of exercise science, exercise physiology, nutrition, strength and conditioning, programming, exercise selection, and then into the gym setup and maintenance, as well as some of like the floor planouts, legal stuff. So it's a broad topic, and it's going to hit a lot of different topics. So I think my expectation when I first heard about it was like, well, I'm going to take the test. I had gone to school for exercise science. So I was like, yeah, I was going to breeze through this. I'm just going to do some exercise science stuff. And then when I got the book and started looking at it, I was aware of how much sports specific things are in the applied section, which is the second half of that test. How I studied for it, or some ways that I studied for it beyond just taking exercise science classes, exercise physiology classes, was falling back a little bit on experience. I'd been interning and coaching sports for a little while, so I had a good background in the test exercise testing for sports. And that's going to be a portion of your applied section, like a fairly large portion of your applied section. And then the exercise selection and exercise technique itself, if that's not something that is regularly incorporated into your everyday life, like if you're not a gym person, if you're not out there trying these exercises, that can be a little tough when the video portion comes up, because they're going to ask you specifically from the video portion what is wrong with the exercise technique, or how would you improve this exercise technique. And if you've never done it yourself, it can be a little confusing. So, general recommendation is get out there and try a lot of the exercises, try to do them by the NSCA standard, and then see how that feels for you, how it looks for you, and then you'll be able to better replicate what's going on in the test itself. Also, if you have time coaching athletes or military service members or whoever, like just coaching in people, that's going to be really helpful, because you're going to get repetitions, seeing the programming putting out, seeing the exercises you're putting out. So that's really going to be helpful in the applied setting. For the first half of the test, which is the physiology, like basic science portion, fall back on what you learned in school. Definitely study the book for the test. Know what the NSCA wants you to know. You may have learned something different in classes, but you're being tested on the NSCA Essentials of Strength and Conditioning book. So make sure you spend time learning what the book wants you to learn, because that's what the test is going to be over.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting because, with the practical applied section, just kind of getting out there and getting the experience is super useful for that, which I think is so different than, other types of standardized exams that people might be studying for. Like you can't just sit in front of a book or a computer and, Google these things. It's interesting to kind of hear that perspective on it, but it also makes sense because that's what you're studying and what you're getting the certification for anyway. So I guess my next question is, you know, what kind of tips do you have for people who are trying to like balance work, school, just life in general when they're trying to prepare for this exam?
That can definitely be tough, trying to balance the study portion with maybe the school study portion with maybe the working and the applied experience portion that you're getting in. One thing that's pretty helpful is seeing how those areas all relate to each other and utilizing them to study or to bring back knowledge that you may see test. For example, if you're in an exercise physiology class, I know when I taught exercise physiology, students would ask me like, "Hey, is this going to be on the CSCS test?" Sometimes I would say like, yeah, like this is going to come on there. And other times I'd be like, yeah, like I don't think it's going to be on there. Like this is something that we're learning in this class that may not be on that test. But while you're studying for maybe your midterms and your finals, you can have your CSCS book, your Essentials of Strength and Conditioning next to you and be like, well, this lines up, so I should make sure to hit this a little bit more. And maybe like this exercise physiology concept to see on the test. So I'm going to make sure that that gets like, I keep those notes and I use them to study later for my CSCS exam. An area where this does come into play is if you have the nutrition section. So 20 questions, and the first like science portion are nutrition questions. And they're pretty basic nutrition, but they're basic nutrition out of the NSCA textbook. You can make some flashcards, but because it's basic nutrition, you're probably going to see that exact same thing in your nutrition one, your sports nutrition classes, any classes that you're taking in school. So make sure to really hammer those basics home, and then you might not have to study as much for the test because you're already going to get it in school. If you're trying to balance work, like if you're going internship, let's say you're doing a 40-hour internship and you're trying to study for the test, same thing. See the exercises that might be outlined in the Essentials of Strength and Conditioning. And then when you're coaching those exercises, when you're seeing those exercises, try to relate them back to what you're learning while you're studying. Another area where this comes in really handy is like balancing that work or using that work experience for the test is there's a couple questions. Everybody gets different questions, but there's always a couple that look something like you have athlete A and they participate in a sport, for example, rowing, and it gives you some fitness characteristics. So like their max clean and jerk is like 135 pounds. Their body weight is 220 pounds. They're a male. They can row 500 meters in like, I don't know, a minute and a half, and they can jump 40 inches. Like which one of these, what should they work on most? And it's not going to say like clean rowing, jumping. It's going to say like power expression, lower body power expression, like upper body strength or core strength. And then you have to know how that relates to the fitness characteristic that is lacking the most. So if you're coaching regularly, you can do that with your clients or your athletes that you're working with. See where they're deficient or where they have areas for improvement, and then relate back to, hey, what did I learn in my CSCS prep test? Okay, so this is what that athlete should work on, because you're going to get a myriad of questions from sports that you don't have a lot of experience with. But if you know what like collegiate level good looks like for power expression and you have a basic understanding of that, you're going to be able to relate it back to the test. So you to work in your school experience to help study for the test. Another way to help study for the test, this is what I did, and it may not work for everybody. I realize that I am a strange individual, but I would sit there on Sunday when I was watching football and I would just like read through the chapters while watching football. And I wasn't taking in a massive amount of information. I'm sure you guys say that is not the best way to study. And I know it is not the best way to study, but it would kind of put it in my brain. And I would be able to like get pattern recognition by seeing things a lot of the pictures, a lot of the graphs, a lot of tables, and I would see them a lot. And just getting that pattern recognition when I came to the test, I may have not had it fully memorized, but I had a good idea of like, hey, I know what chapter this was from. I think it was about right here, so I could answer the question more appropriately. You get three choices on every question. So if you can eliminate one, you're at a 50-50 chance. If you can eliminate two, you don't even have to know that's the right answer. You just know that the two aren't the right answer, and you can be set for that.
Yeah, I think that's such a good approach. Maybe not like the most common, but it's very accessible. Like everyone can be watching sports and try and, use that during their studies to relate it back to it and just try and understand those concepts more. So I think that's a really interesting approach. And then, so for each section, are there any specific topics that you find most difficult, with foundations versus the practical applied, or even within those sections? And like, what advice do you have to kind of approach those?
The stations portion is failed a lot less. So you're graded, each portion is graded separately. So you can fail the scientific foundation, but pass the applied portion, and then you only have to retake the scientific foundation. The scientific foundation is not failed as often as the applied portion, from what I see in my intern students that I've worked with, because that is very like regurgitation of the information from the book. You can make flashcards for
Right.
the scientific portion, just boom, like you flashcard it, right? Chambers of the heart, got it. Like next. So for those, I would recommend study just like normal. Like make some flashcards, hit the main points, probably do the study guides that you guys have, a lot of the practice questions you guys have. That's going to kill it for that first portion. And then really, really understand the nutrition because they're going to ask plenty of nutrition questions. And the nutrition questions are very numbers based. So it'll be like how many grams of protein should an athlete who weighs like 100 or like 100 kilos get into their diet if they're an hour before competition or something along those lines. And you got to know those equations because that's a little more like applied thinking. It's not so much just like flip and turn the answer, but you have to understand where that number comes from. You get little scratch paper and they don't make it like ridiculous. Like you're not going to have to be doing like crazy math in your head. It's kind of basic math just to test that you know where the numbers are coming from. And the applied portion is difficult for people. Like I cannot stress enough how important it is to get some real world experience. The applied portion is so difficult if you don't have experience working with people in a setting where they're doing some of the exercises or like you've worked with some athletes before. And I'm not saying you have to work with athletes, you can work general pop, but like just doing some of the exercise. So much of it is exercise technique and exercise selection. And if you don't know the exercises, you're not going to be able to select the right ones. And if you don't know what proper technique looks like, they're real tricky. Man, they're really tricky. They always routinely, not always, but most of the time, one of the answers is going to be there was nothing wrong with this exercise or like everything was performed to standard. And if you don't know what you're to look for, you're gonna second guess yourself because that's always going to be an option. So getting some
Right.
some real world experience is super helpful. And then you could take the book with you and just go to the gym and like crank out the exercise, like try them out. Because there's going to be images on how to do it. There's going to be videos online of how to do it. Just try exercise so you know how it feels. Because it might ask you, like in a squat, this is our prime mover. And if you don't know the muscle as the prime mover, if you don't know the joints that are being used, if you can't like pinpoint what's happening, you're not going to be able to answer that question effectively. So understanding those concepts, getting and not just spending all your time reading the book, but trying out some of the stuff is pretty important. And then the thing that I see people struggle with the most is the programming section. Not because it's a very hard concept, but because there are 100 different ways to program exercise. Like I have the way that I like to program exercise. And like, shocker, it is not in the NSCA book. It uses concept NSCA book, but is not verbatim from the NSCA book. So if you do have a lot of experience programming, being able to sit back, learn what's in the book, and be like, hey, man, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, even though that I know like in the real world setting, it may be a little different. Like that balance, you've got to balance your real world experience with what they want you to know in the book. I was told that by one of my professors. He's like, dude, just answer how they want you to answer it in the book. And then when you get done with the test, you have hit your baseline, like you've hit your foundations, and then you can go learn all the crazy stuff that's going on out there.
Right. It's like you have to know the rules first before you break them, I
Exactly.
think is the saying. Not that you're breaking rules, but doing things a little differently and a little more customized. And then, so kind of leading to our next, the next thing I wanted to get into, which is, um, okay, so now you've passed this exam, you're, certified. Then how do you use the CSCS to grow as a professional, and what are kind of like the next steps on that path?
Yeah, so your CSCS, people get it confused sometimes. They think that it is like, I have made it, I have passed my CSCS. Like when a doctor passes their board exams, they are
Hmm.
free and clear. Like go, you are a doctor, man. Like
Hmm.
you've been through some stuff. Like you know it. When you pass
Yeah.
the CSCS, you could have gone, like one of my friends, he went to school for marketing. He had a college degree. He went and took a CPR class. He studied the book. He passed his CSCS. That was the foundational baseline knowledge you need to understand the entry level of the profession. I would say it's an entry level barrier to entry test. Once you pass the test, you do not know everything. I know I passed the test and I was like, I know everything. And then I looked up a book on something like a programming topic and I was like, I know nothing. All right, back to
Yeah.
square one. But
Hmm.
like, like you said, you know the basics and you know the foundation. Then you need to grow and learn more and utilize that foundation to grow your knowledge base. The best way to do that, and I know I've like harped on this a bunch already. It's like been 15 minutes in, and I think I've said this like 5 times already. Get experience, get an internship, get a part time job, train your friends. The best advice I got from one of the coaches I worked with, he's a real smart guy. He's like, just start making programs for your friends. He's like, it doesn't matter if they don't do them. If they try one day out of there and they give you some feedback, like you're getting better. If you write an 8 week program for your friend that's like, I want to go to the gym, I just want to get in shape, that's experience and you're learning from that. You're going to learn how things line up. And then if that friend comes back to you and is like, hey, I really like this day, I didn't like this day, I don't know what's going on over here, then maybe you learn some things from that. You learn where the exercises fit together. You learn progression strategies. You learn all sorts of things. The NSCA CSCS exam is big into periodization. You're going to periodize the program for a collegiate strength and condition or collegiate athlete or a professional athlete or a high school athlete, some sort of athletic endeavor. I work in the tactical setting. Like military professionals don't have an off season. They don't really have an in season. So we don't have
Yep.
the like preseason, in season, post season, off season kind of model. We need to program and we need to work with them in a little bit of a different way. And again, the CSCS is your foundational knowledge of exercise physiology and applied strength and conditioning. One section that is not hit on really at all in the CSCS, they're talking about adding it in. There's other certifications that can kind of make up this realm, is the personal interaction that you're going to get with clients, that you're going to get with your athletes, and that you're going to get with your individuals. You can't really put a test on that, in my opinion. Like how to talk to somebody is a weird test. Learn how to express the knowledge that you do have in a way that they will understand it and then can utilize your knowledge for the betterment of their sport, their activity, whatever reason they're working with you. So that all comes with the experience. You pass the test, start getting experience. Once you have a few years of experience, then you can start kind of getting creative. Like you've learned some stuff. Now you can step outside that box. Like you said, you can start breaking some of those rules. Maybe those rules don't apply to your setting. Maybe those rules don't apply to this individual. You can treat that individual like what they are, an individual. Maybe you're working with a very high level athlete and that individual doesn't respond in the same way someone who's just starting out responds. So once you've built that foundation and you're tested on that knowledge, you can then grow. It's important to have the basics down. It is important to understand, your very basic like energy systems, exercise selection, periodization strategies. But you can step outside that and you can go into different directions. Some of the best strength coaches in the world, I'll tell you, they don't follow anything that's really in that NSCA book outside of like the basic physiology portions. And then if you
Right.
want to get deeper into it, this is scratching the surface of exercise physiology and base physiology. I mean, go get a master's degree, go a little farther with the education, and you're going to find out that this was like just the bare minimum of exercise physiology and human physiology. Go talk to a doctor and they will school you on some human physiology.
Right.
So like there you can
Yeah.
you can really expand that knowledge base and it just depends on how much work you're willing to put in what areas you're interested in, and what areas are going to benefit your clients. If you're working with track athletes, it's not going to make a lot of sense for you to spend a bunch of time researching how to work with maybe volleyball players. But it might make sense to like learn some of the jumping strategies that volleyball players use for your jumping, like your high jump and your long jump athletes. So there's a lot of
Right.
crossover there, but until you know that that crossover and that exists, that you share knowledge amongst these different activities, you can't really take advantage of it. So get out there, meet people, build a network, and get experience. That was a very long answer to a question that probably should not have been
It's
that
a great answer
long.
though. It's good. Something too that you mentioned that I think is often overlooked in kind of any industry is communicating with people, and especially in, strength and conditioning. You're working with athletes, maybe you're working with the general public. People need to be taught in different ways. They need to be coached in different ways, and you need to understand how, like you said, an individual is going to respond to what you're saying or what you're trying to teach. And you, like you said, you can't, there's no exam for that. It's all experience. You have to, get out there and actually do the thing. And that's going to help you a lot more. Well, great. And then I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about?
When it comes to studying for your CSCS, don't get intimidated. People look at the pass rates, and the first time pass rate is not outstanding. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it is not anywhere close to like 90%. It is lower, like significantly lower.
Mhm.
And people get intimidated by that. And then they think like, well, maybe I failed a portion of the test. I'm not going to be a good strength coach. Like don't think like that. If studying for the test, reach out to somebody. There's plenty of people. I think there's like 40,000 CSCSs out there right now working in strength and conditioning world. There's way more if you include all the PhDs and all the like academics that have a CSCS as well. So just be okay with asking for help. Be okay being confident going into the test. I think it's well over it comes out to over 200 questions. And I think anyone that sits down for a 200 question test, as soon as they're done, is like, I failed that test. There's zero chance that I passed.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then, lo and behold, people get out of the test and they're like, I missed two questions. That was great. I did awesome. Just study, be confident, and then for me, what works for me best is honestly taking practice tests. And I know you guys offer a lot of those practice tests and a lot of practice questions. Give yourself a real life exam. Like take, 100 of the applied questions and 120 or so of the, or 120 of the applied questions and 100 or so of the science questions with a block of nutrition and just take the test. Like sit down and take it and see how you do. And that can build confidence. It can make you feel in ways like we know if you've done something before, you're more likely to succeed or replicate a success because it's a little less scary doing things that second time. So really try to get as much practice you can so that you can pass that test. And then once you pass the test, man, it's smooth sailing from there. You just get some CEUs every year. You go hit a conference, meet some people, you learn some new things, and you build that career.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much. This has been Board Certified, hosted by Cassandra from Achievable with Mark Christiani from O2X. And Achievable has great online courses for the USMLE Step 1, MCAT, PTCE, MPTE, CSCS, and others. And you can try them out for free at achievable.me.